Hey everybody, TacticAngel here, back on the PlayStation 4 to take a look at a premium ship in World of Warships Legends. Today we'll be reviewing the Tier 7 Premium Imperial Japanese Navy Battleship, Key. For this review, we'll start off with some history, work into analysis, some commander options, then stats before we finally finish off with some gameplay. And if you do want to skip around at all, please do look down in the description for some time codes. The Key, or Key-class battleships, were never built. The presentation that you see here is based on the theoretical follow-on to the Amagi-class battlecruisers, which, likewise, were also never built, at least not as battlecruisers. Both the Amagi-class and Key-class ships were done in by the same treaty, the Washington Naval Treaty signed in 1922, which greatly limited the displacement of capital ships, in other words, battleships and battlecruisers, that the Imperial Japanese Navy could complete. The Amagi-class battlecruiser program had already started, with 3 hulls having been laid down, when Japan became a signatory to that treaty, ultimately putting an end to their construction of those battlecruisers. Instead, 2 of those hulls were designated for conversion to aircraft carriers, with only one being completed, as the Akagi, and the other, the Amagi herself, being so badly damaged in an earthquake that the hull was scrapped instead of completed. The Key-class battleships were to be a follow-on to the Amagi-class design, featuring a heavier protection in exchange for reduced speed. You can see a lot of the family resemblance in the game, which is true in both the Amagi and Key's original design, but both ships in-game feature several modernizations intended to show more or less a reasonable upgrade during the interwar period, common to other existent Japanese battleships and battlecruisers. If you want a much more faithful representation of the Amagi's intended appearance, then you should look at the Ashitaka. The Key would have been around a dozen meters shorter and have a similar, if only slightly lower top speed of 29 knots, but the same main battery armament of 10 16.1-inch guns in 5 turrets, with a pair superfiring fore and aft, and 1 additional turret tucked in amidships behind the funnels. In total, 4 Key-class battleships were ordered, first the Key and Owari in October 1921, and then an additional 2 battleships that were never named after the Japanese learned that the United States was planning on building about 1 billion new battleships, at least half of which would probably be sailing the Pacific Ocean. Of course, all of this came to a sudden stop shortly thereafter in February 1922, when construction ceased on the Key-class ships due to the treaty considerations. These ships would have been almost 10,000 tons heavier than the allowable weight under the treaty. And at that point, the Amagi-class battlecruisers, which were considerably further along in their development, were chosen for conversion into aircraft carriers, and like I said, ultimately only one being completed. Thus ended the short and mostly non-existent history of the Key-class battleship. As far as the Key in World Warships Legends, she feels very much like a Tier 7 Mutsu overall, and if you still enjoyed playing the Amagi with all of her accuracy nerfs, then it's at least a decent chance that you'll enjoy playing the Key, though I tend to believe that her dispersion is even somehow more tragic than that. The Key's advantages are improved areas of protection, namely the main belt, which is quite capable of dealing with just about any shots that it can take as long as you have a nice 45-degree angle. The belt actually wraps around nicely towards the stern of your ship, offering you good protection while presenting a kiting angle, which is something that you'd naturally want to do considering that you have the majority of your guns facing in that direction, and you can still maintain a bounce angle, or at least something close to it, while firing your forward guns over your shoulder. The Key also comes with torpedoes. While these are supposedly weapons that are theoretically capable of doing damage to your enemies, functionally it's safer to say that they are more useful for judging the movements of enemy ships, that is, gauging their speed and heading, and it's possible that enemy players will respect the space in the immediate vicinity of your ship in the same way that people don't like to get too close to the Scharnhorst, Gneisenau, Odin, or Tirpitz, though I suspect that this will be a very rare ship, so your torpedoes may not afford you the same kind of brawling deterrence of those other ships I've named. And normally I try to pick a third option, though I have to say that the list of strengths for the key are pretty short. So I guess maybe I would say that you have all the advantages of a ship that have 16-inch guns, which mean you can ignore a lot of armor out there on equal tier or lower tier cruisers. Unfortunately, the key had really frustrating accuracy if fired at any sort of range, and even though she has really nice big guns, she does seem to score a surprising number of bounces. This may be sheer dumb luck on my part, but straddling all of your shots with your ship and then miraculously bouncing the only shells that you have off the top of a turret or the front face seem more than anything like the key's superpower. And to the extent that you are baited into wanting to use those torpedoes as an offensive weapon, this is not really advisable, I want to say, because honestly, almost everything on this ship is not suitable for engaging at close quarters ranges. When we come to commanders, I'm going to skip Togo this time, because I didn't have a lot of time with this ship, and I didn't play a single game with him, let alone several of them, which is what I like to usually do before making any recommendations. Due to all the other stuff in the game to do, plus, Christmas, New Year's, and all that travel, I tender my apologies to you. In any case, your inclination is probably going to be to try to run this with a similar crew as what you have on the Amagi. Considering the key's less than amazing maneuverability, that doesn't seem all that bad of an idea, though most of the choices that you will take here will hamper the key's already unimpressive maneuverability and really make torpedoes a weapon of last resort or simply useful for aiming your guns at a distance. In any case, Takeo Takagi is probably what most people will want to run to improve those gun ranges, accuracy, and hitting power. Unfortunately, his skills aren't going to be enough to really get these shells to behave, and these choices will cause problems for you if you push at any time with your battleship. That said, I expected to not really enjoy my time playing the key with Nobutake Kondo, based largely on the poor performance that I was getting out of the guns with a heavy accuracy build, but I was surprised to see that it isn't really that much worse, leading me to believe that this ship suffers from having some truly terrible Sigma in Legends, that meaning a lower chance of hitting towards the center of its dispersion, rather than just a dispersion problem. In any case, if you do want to use Kondo, I still do not recommend doing it for brawling purposes because the poor maneuverability, terrible turret traverse, and long reload of the main battery are all working against you. Instead, Kondo will be used to improve your rate of fire, turret traverse, and survivability. Yes, I did still miss a lot, but actually not that much higher of a percentage of my overall shots. As we look at stats, I'll be talking about the key versus the Amagi primarily, which I think you ought to have a good feel for if you're looking to try to pull this ship out of a crate. As far as survivability then, the key is actually a relatively healthy ship with 68,200 hit points base. That's about 2,000 more than the average for the tier and about 6,000 more than you'll find on Amagi. We also see another reason why you'd probably try not to brawl in the key. This is that 25% torpedo reduction you see on screen. That's pretty bad. And at the risk of spoilers that will happen in a few seconds, the key is also pretty bad at getting out of the way. In total, this is 5% below average or 18% worse than you'll find on the Amagi for torpedo reduction. The armor scheme is similar to the Amagi, but it has a harder outer shell with a more gooey middle. This is frankly kind of just a trade, and will result in a well-angled key doing a bit better of a job defeating all damage put into its belt, but a poorer angled key, particularly at longer ranges, being even more vulnerable to citadel damage. This is due to the key having a relatively poorly armored citadel roof. Since the key has a citadel that is completely below the waterline, this shouldn't be too much of a risk at close ranges. Also, you do have a turtleback like the Amagi, and though this angled belt is weaker than the Amagi, it still should be enough to force a bounce chance against every shell that hits it at close range. At longer ranges though, You do want to make sure that you're appropriately angled to improve the chances that your belt armor bounces the shot, because the green section of this scheme is only 22 millimeters, which will get overmatched by every battleship that you can face other than the Scharnhorst, if that shell manages to get into your ship. Now, your deck armor is going to help against most ships that aren't named the Yamato, but the problem here is probably shells that are entering through your upper belt or casemate because you haven't angled your ship. This is a pretty easy shot for pretty much any battleship sitting broadside to you at range, and a good reason why you definitely want to remain angled to give your belt armor at least a decent chance of protecting you. Unsurprisingly, the Key is armed with 5 turrets, each mounting two 16.1 inch guns. They range out to 17.1 kilometers and reload at 31 seconds. This gives the Amagi a 100 meter advantage in terms of range and 1 second difference on the reload. Both ships share a joint worst turret traverse at the tier at 45 seconds, and where it comes to damage, these two ships are exactly the same, at least on paper. The HE has, technically, the highest damage potential of any Tier 7 battleship, but the low rate of fire means that you're not such a good fire starter, even if the individual shell chance is 30%. And since you have 16-inch guns, the wise thing to do is pretty much to just stick to AP here. Those shells also do an above average 12,600 damage, same as the Amagi. For what it's worth, some of you may note that the Key's secondary array has decent statistics. In fact, she does have the second highest secondary DPM of any Tier 7 battleship, but because of her lacking maneuverability, torpedo protection, reload speed, and turret traverse, again, this ship is probably not best played as a brawler. And now that we've said that again, let's talk about the short-ranged weapon that is technically in your arsenal, torpedoes. The Key has a triple torpedo launcher on each side of the ship. Your fish can swim 6 kilometers, just like German battleship torpedoes, though they do have a bit more damage at 14,600 damage each, rather than 13,700. The reload is similar at 90 seconds, which is also pretty much what you would expect on a German ship with close defense torpedoes. The speed is 63 knots, rather than 64, which I can't say is a noticeable difference, and for what it's worth, you have very detectable torpedoes at 1.6 kilometer range, which means your torpedoes are going to be very noticeable, but honestly, your enemy will probably already be clued into the danger you pose to them by the 45,000 ton battleship with 16.1 inch guns bearing down at them at close range. Probably. Key's maneuverability is pretty unimpressive. She has average speed and an average rudder shift, but she does turn a bit wider than the Amagi and nearly 50 meters worse than the average battleship at the tier. In total, she's half a knot slower, 10 meters worse in a turn, and a hair more than half a second worse with her rudder. In short, whatever your opinion of the Amagi's maneuverability, which isn't great if you were to ask me, the Key is just a bit worse in every department here. And then when we come to concealment, which is also relatively poor, this 15.6 kilometer detectability by sea is the highest at the tier, as is the 12.5 kilometer detection from air. Key also takes the hat trick here, having the highest detectability while firing from smoke, but as a battleship, that's probably not that big of a deal. In the consumable department, the Key offers you no surprises and the same choices you enjoy on most battleships. So you have your standard heal, with a standard number of them. You also come with the choice of a fighter, spotter aircraft, or the secondary accuracy booster. To be truthful, there's not really too much of a choice here, since you don't really want to get into close combat with this thing. Maybe if carriers are super annoying in the future, then you'll get something out of fighter aircraft, but barring that, you'll probably need the spotter aircraft so that you can hit something at range, or at least feel like you have the chance to do that. And as we jump into some gameplay, we're going to be on north, and as you can see, we are on the far east spawn on the south side. This is near as anything to my least favorite place to spawn because it offers me absolutely the least opportunity to exercise the normal amount of crazy that I like to exhibit in my average game. So what we're going to do, we're going to put our commander up on the screen. As you can see, we are playing with a full accuracy build. This is also one of the things that I love to do. No, it's not. Anyway, the point of this exercise is mostly to exhibit the general shooting characteristics of this ship. I have given it my best chance at making it accurate, and we'll just go into the game. As you can see, I'm trying to work back towards the middle because I personally view playing behind this island on the east side to be a really, really terrible idea. The only chance that I would have at beating someone who would be silly enough to drive down that is if they're just basically going full potato. If they're actually in any sort of ship that is meant to do damage at close quarters, I probably won't do so well. So as we're coming around the edge of this particular island, we start to put some shells out there on the Bismarck. As you can see, we managed to land just a couple of shots. I understand that I was not looking in the right direction to show you how well that they were necessarily aimed. But at this point, he has fully Naziered into that island, and at least the aiming indicator is telling me that I should be able to hit him. I do. We get a pretty respectable 16,000 damage. Not too bad, particularly against a Bismarck, which is a pretty tough nut to crack. And as you can see, we are slowly reloading ourselves. We expect that he's going to start to move forward once he has figured out the dimensions of that island. We managed to land another 14,000 on him, which is a pretty respectable amount of damage. Naturally, anything that you hit with 16-inch guns is not going to enjoy the experience. And now that we have tucked ourselves back behind this island, we are going to start to move forward again. This time, as we do that, you can see I am pre-turning my rudder as I come to a near complete stop, backing up all the way to port so that I can hopefully get as far through this turn as physically possible before they see me. These moments, right starting about here, are actually relatively perilous for a ship like this because my belt armor, though really pretty nice, is not going to repel 15 or 16-inch guns. When given the chance to shoot at anything, I choose to shoot at this Tashkent since I can actually see it. We actually land a punishing amount of damage against him. If I'd been really, really on my game, I think I would have launched some torpedoes there just to kind of dissuade him from getting any closer to me. I'm not sure if he doesn't know that I have torpedoes or if he just doesn't think I'll hit him. They're both pretty likely chances there. Unfortunately, we had HE loaded there. We shoot pretty far out there. Pretty well aimed shot as far as I could tell. Don't come away with a whole lot, and sadly we clearly have underestimated the amount of time that it would take torpedoes to get to me, and at this point I am at relatively low hit points. But as you can see, one of the advantages to what I've been doing is that I am sailing towards this Bismarck back here. And one of the funny things that RNG likes to do to me is give me an unlimited number of this commander, which means though he is legendary 3, I have actually not invested anything into Takeo Takagi, or other than the promotion orders. That's pretty incredible if you really think about how many of this commander I've pulled out of random crates. To have him legendary 3, and we're well on our way to legendary 4. And it's like the least likely commander that I would ever need, because I don't play Japanese battleships, and I really don't play accuracy battleships either. Anyway, you see that I've said to that Bismarck who needs support that I am more than happy to give it to him, and I am gonna stick around him, let's just say, because he's asked me nicely. Not at all because he is passively healing me at all times. As you can see, we continue to put shots out there. We aren't doing real great with the accuracy, but we do get a pretty random stray shot there that manages to clip the back end of that Shapayev, and that also looks terrible, but apparently we do the same thing there. Judging that he's probably one of the only ships that are actually shooting HE at me, I do go ahead and pop my damage control because the amount of hit points that I have is still troubling. And now I'm going to start turning all the way out to starboard just to kind of turn around. Once again, facing the back half of my ship to the enemy is not all that bad in this particular boat, because you do have a really nice armored belt that wraps past your last turret to the aft and gives you a reasonable amount of damage protection. The actual aft of the ship is 32 millimeters, which means if you do get hit there, you know, if it's a 15 or even 16-inch gun, you do have a reasonable chance of bouncing it. We start putting a couple more shells out on the enemy. Unfortunately, the game ends at that point. And for the most part, this is probably what you're going to do in the key, which is stay at range and shoot things with your guns. I mean, that's like 90% of World of Warships. Anyway, it's a little bit even more with the key. In terms of closing thoughts for the key, I feel like this is a collector's ship. If you really, really want this ship, you're probably not trying to get it because it's particularly good. For the most part, I think that playing the Amagi is just as enjoyable, and you actually have, unless you really plan on using the torpedoes, almost every advantage when using that particular ship. The key itself, the things I like about it most are that I actually kind of like the model. I think it looks good. It looks mostly like an Amagi, but for some reason I like it just a little bit better. But other than that, it doesn't do a lot for me. So in any case, it's kind of a short review. This is the key. I don't know what to tell you. I hope you've enjoyed the replay though, and I do hope to see you guys on the next one.